these children, if she really fled the royal family because she wanted her children to grow up in a life that did not require media attention, what she is doing is not the truth. And here is what I think about Meghan, because I think she is a malignant narcissist who is a truly terrible person.
There is a moment, and if you have been watching this story unfold, you will know exactly the moment I mean, when the mask slips so completely that there is simply no going back. No amount of carefully curated Instagram posts, no tearful podcast confessionals, no strategically timed appearances at important causes can put it back in place. And when that moment comes, the people who have been watching most closely, the people who have spent years studying this woman's every calculated move, they do not hesitate. They call it exactly as they see it. Piers Morgan has never been a man who hesitates. And when it comes to Meghan Markle's treatment of her own children, specifically 7-year-old Archie and 4-year-old Lilibet, he has been absolutely unequivocal. This is not, he has argued with considerable force and considerable evidence, the behaviour of a mother protecting her children from the glare of public life. This is the behaviour of a woman using her children as instruments, as props, as the final card in a hand that is running desperately short of options. What Piers Morgan has been saying behind the scenes, and increasingly, very loudly indeed in front of the scenes, is something that a growing number of informed, respected voices now agree with completely. That the Archie and Lilibet strategy is not about love. It is not about protection. It is not about giving two young children the peaceful, private, ordinary upbringing their mother claimed was the entire reason she blew up the most famous family in the world. It is about leverage. It is about money. It is about a brand that is struggling, a public profile that is fading, and a woman who has worked out, with the cold calculation that has defined her entire adult life, that her children are the one asset she has not yet fully monetized. And frankly, the audacity of it is breathtaking. Because this is the same woman who told the world she was escaping the royal family to protect her children. This is the same woman who wept about the impossibility of raising a family under constant public scrutiny. This is the same woman who built an entire public identity around the idea that she was, above all else, a devoted, selfless, fiercely protective mother. And yet here we are. Here we are watching her post her daughter's voice online to sell jam. Here we are watching her use her son's name as a commercial brand. Here we are watching her deploy these children like chess pieces on a board that only she can see, and frankly, the rest of us are supposed to smile and say how beautiful it all is. We are not smiling, and the people who know this story best are most certainly not smiling either. Tonight, we are going to go through exactly what has been happening, exactly what Piers Morgan and others have been saying, and exactly what this strategy tells us about the woman at the centre of it. Because once you see it clearly, and by the end of this video, you will see it very clearly indeed, you simply cannot unsee it. To understand why what is happening right now with Meghan and her children matters so profoundly, you need to understand where Meghan Markle currently finds herself. And the honest answer is, in a very precarious position indeed.
Meghan's podcast has fallen off the charts. She's been criticized for the content. There are rumors that her As Ever launch wasn't as successful as she considered it. Critically, With Love Meghan was not a success.
The Netflix show With Love Meghan did not perform as she hoped. The As Ever lifestyle brand launch was greeted with considerably more skepticism than enthusiasm, even from people who had previously given her the benefit of the doubt. The podcast venture has struggled. The Hollywood comeback that she mapped out with such confidence has stalled at almost every significant turn. The A-list friends she expected to rally around her have been conspicuously quiet. And the business empire she promised her husband they would build together in California has not delivered anything close to what was promised. Piers Morgan has tracked every single one of these failures with forensic attention. He has noted, and noted loudly, the pattern that emerges. Every time one venture collapses, every time one strategy fails, every time the public's interest in Meghan Markle dims just a little further, something happens. Something involving the children. A photograph, a mention, a voice clip, a carefully placed reference that reminds everyone, oh yes, she is a mother. She has these beautiful, precious children. How could you possibly criticize her? It is, those who know her best have argued, a playbook as old as Hollywood itself. Struggling star deploys children for sympathy and engagement, and it works, for a time. It generates clicks. It generates coverage. It temporarily silences the critics. Because who wants to be the person who says something unkind about a mother and her little ones? But the problem with that playbook, as Piers Morgan has pointed out with characteristic bluntness, is that it only works if people do not notice what you are doing. And people have noticed. Millions of people have noticed. What makes this moment particularly significant is the timing. We are watching this unfold at precisely the point when Meghan's brand is at its most vulnerable. The goodwill she accumulated simply by being a newcomer, by being someone the public were inclined to support before she gave them reasons not to, has been almost entirely spent. The charitable interpretation of her behaviour, that she is flawed but well-meaning, that she is struggling but trying, is harder and harder to sustain when you look at what she is actually doing with her children and why. And that is the conversation we are having tonight. That is the conversation Piers Morgan has been having for some time now. And it is a conversation that the facts, I am afraid, entirely support.
She is so cynical in the way that she uses those children and tries to frame any criticism from people like Maureen Callahan or UP Diner or me as, how on earth can you be horrible to these kids? But we're not. It's not about the children at all. It's about you. And it's about you saying one thing, doing another, and then blaming people who are simply reporting on the truth of what you have done.
So let us establish exactly what we are talking about, because the details matter enormously here. Meghan Markle recently sat down for a wide-ranging interview with Jamie Kern-Lima, a conversation that was positioned as warm, personal, and revealing. And in one sense, it was revealing, just perhaps not in the way Meghan intended. During that interview, Meghan spoke about her children. She spoke about sending them emails at the end of every day, emails they will supposedly read when they are older and understand what their mother went through, what she sacrificed, what she felt. She spoke emotionally. She used the word beautiful approximately as often as most people use punctuation, and she positioned herself, very deliberately, as a mother so devoted, so thoughtful, so emotionally attuned to her children, that she is essentially writing them letters from the front line of her own extraordinary life. And then, separately, just days after standing alongside the grieving parents of children who had taken their own lives, and just days after publicly calling on social media companies to do more to protect young people online, just days after all of that, Meghan posted a video to her Instagram account featuring the voice of her 4-year-old daughter Lilibet. Not an accidental glimpse, not a candid moment, a produced, deliberate, carefully timed release of her youngest child's voice to the global public. A child whose grandfather has never heard that voice. A child whose royal family have never been given any access. A child whose existence has been used as a bargaining chip since before she was born. The timing was not accidental. It never is with Meghan Markle. Nothing is ever accidental. That is the thing you must understand if you want to understand anything about this woman. Every move is calculated. Every post is considered. Every revelation is timed. And the release of Lilibet's voice came, as observers immediately noted, at precisely the moment when something else was happening in the royal world. Something involving William and Catherine's youngest son, Prince Louis, who had just turned 8. William and Catherine had released a sweet, natural, entirely unforced video of Louis, a proper little boy being a proper little boy. The kind of footage that makes your heart expand in your chest, because it is just so genuinely lovely. And within days, Meghan releases the Lilibet clip. Draw your own conclusions. Several very informed people have already drawn theirs.
It was also when we heard Prince Louis's voice for the first time. Right when he turned 7, there was a video release by William and Catherine of Louis talking. And then this video with Meghan and her daughter comes out. So she was trolling the child, Prince Louis, or, the William and Catherine. So Meghan is using her children to troll the royal children or the royal son, and also to use them to help with her, branding.
But let us go back a little further, because the Lilibet voice clip did not emerge from nowhere. It emerged from a very specific context. A context in which Meghan had been building, brick by brick, a very particular narrative about herself as a mother, as a woman, as a human being who has been misunderstood and mistreated, and who is, above all, deeply, profoundly, beautifully devoted to her children. The Jamie Kern-Lima interview was the most concentrated expression of that narrative, and what struck those watching most closely was not what Meghan said, but what she did not say. She did not address the bullying allegations that have circled her for years. She did not address the staff turnover that has been documented extensively and corroborated by multiple sources. She did not address the very specific, very serious accusation levelled at her and Harry by Dr. Sophie Chandaka, a black woman, which means Meghan cannot deploy her usual deflection, who left Harry's own charity, the one formed in memory of his mother, and levelled accusations of bullying as she went, not to a gossip site, to the Financial Times. That is how you know someone means business. None of that was addressed. Instead, Meghan talked about herself. Through the lens of her children, she talked about herself. Through the frame of her emotions, she talked about herself. Through every question that was posed to her, she managed, with remarkable consistency, to circle back to the subject that interests her most, which is Meghan Markle. Piers Morgan identified this pattern early and has never let it go, because what he saw, what many of us saw in that interview, was not a woman opening up about motherhood. It was a woman using motherhood as cover, using her children as emotional armor, constructing a version of herself as a mother so warm, so dedicated, so beautiful, that surely nobody could look at it and feel anything other than sympathy and admiration. But here is the thing about armor: if you look at it closely enough, you can see the seams, you can see where it was hammered together, you can see the joins, and when Meghan Markle talks about her children, those who are paying attention can see every single seam.
The problem you've got here in a relationship with Meghan and Harry is this is a boy that was pretty much traumatised by media presence when he was little. He didn't really want any of this publicity. He was always attacking photographers. She's someone, ever since she was on the red carpet, who's craved publicity.
Now, here is where it gets truly extraordinary, and I want you to sit with this for a moment, because it tells you everything. In the days leading up to the release of that Lilibet voice clip, Meghan Markle had been standing with parents. Specifically, the grieving parents of children who had lost their lives, in part because of the pressures of social media and life online. She had positioned herself as a champion for children's safety in the digital space. She had spoken with apparent sincerity and evident emotion about the dangers of exposing children to the internet. She had aligned herself with one of the most powerful and legitimate causes of our time. And then she posted her 4-year-old daughter's voice on Instagram. Let that land for a second. Just let it land. Piers Morgan did not let it land quietly. He called it out with precisely the directness the moment demanded. Because what Meghan did in that sequence of events is not merely hypocritical. It is something considerably more calculated than simple hypocrisy. She used the grieving parents of children harmed online as a backdrop, as a moral frame, and then she used her own child online for engagement. And she did it in a way that made it almost impossible to criticize, because any criticism could be deflected as being cruel about a little girl. But Piers Morgan has never been deterred by the impossibility of a conversation, and his position shared, it must be said, by a considerable and growing number of people, is that the criticism is not of Lilibet. It is never of the children. The criticism is of the mother who is making choices those children are far too young to consent to. Choices that serve the mother. Choices that build the brand. Choices that keep Meghan Markle in the conversation at precisely the moment when, without the children, she might very easily drift out of it entirely. Because here is what Piers Morgan understands, and what the data absolutely supports. Meghan Markle with her children gets more engagement than Meghan Markle without them, every single time. It is not a coincidence. It is a strategy.
How can you talk about safety online and then use your children to go online to help sell your products? You're completely contradicting yourself. I mean, if the internet is so dangerous, why are you putting your children on there? Why are you bullying in a covert way, Catherine and William's son? Why are you using your children to get sympathy?
Piers Morgan has been one of the most consistent, most vocal, and frankly most forensically accurate voices on this subject since the very beginning. And his position on the children's strategy has been clear, documented, and supported by everything that has subsequently emerged. His argument made repeatedly, made publicly, made with the kind of evidence that is very difficult to dismiss, is that Meghan Markle's use of Archie and Lilibet is fundamentally dishonest. Not just strategically cynical, though it is certainly that, fundamentally dishonest, because the entire premise on which she left the royal family, the entire justification she gave the world for blowing up one of the most respected institutions on earth, was the protection and privacy of her children. She said, in terms that she could not raise her son in an environment of such intense public scrutiny, that it was damaging, that it was wrong, that no child should be exposed to that kind of attention. And then she made her children the centerpiece of her brand. Piers Morgan has never, not once, accepted the suggestion that this is a contradiction she stumbled into accidentally. His view, and it is a view increasingly difficult to argue with, is that the children were always part of the plan, that the privacy argument was always a convenient framing device rather than a genuine motivation. That Meghan Markle knew, from very early in her relationship with Harry, that the children of a senior royal would be her most valuable long-term asset. And she has been deploying that asset with extraordinary patience and extraordinary calculation ever since. He has also pointed to something that deserves far more attention than it has received, which is the question of what these children will make of all this when they are old enough to understand it. When 7-year-old Archie is 17 and looks back at the way his image, his name, his very existence has been used commercially, what will he think? When 4-year-old Lilibet is 14 and discovers that her voice was released to the world without her knowledge, without her consent as a strategic brand moment, how will she feel? These are not abstract questions. They are the questions that responsible adults ask when they are making decisions about children in their care, and Piers Morgan has been asking them loudly.
But wanting to exploit their royal titles, I think it stinks. And I think what King Charles should do, he should just strip them of the titles. Let them go off and be, celebrities, that's fine. But don't do it in the name of our royal family.
That sentiment, do not do it in the name of our royal family, is the thread that runs through everything Piers Morgan has said on this subject. Because the children's value, their leverage, their commercial appeal, is entirely derived from their royal identity. Remove the HRH. Remove the Sussex title. Remove the connection to the most famous family in the world, and what you have is 2 children whose mother is a former actress who appeared in a legal drama, perfectly nice, entirely without the global magnetism that currently makes them valuable. And Meghan knows this, which is precisely why, as Piers Morgan has noted, she clings to those titles while publicly pretending they do not matter. Which is precisely why every reference to Archie and Lilibet comes laced with the implicit reminder that these are the grandchildren of a king, the great-grandchildren of a queen who reigned for 70 years, the children of a prince. Strip away the royal connection and the strategy collapses entirely, which is why she will never voluntarily let it go. Because here is the thing about Meghan Markle and patterns. She has one, and it is remarkably consistent. Remarkably consistent to the point where, if you know what you are looking for, you can almost set your watch by it. When a venture fails, the children appear. When the press turns negative, the children appear. When the brand needs a boost, the children appear. When a rival, and yes, let us be honest about this, Catherine and William absolutely register as rivals in Meghan's mind, does something that generates warmth and good coverage, the children appear. The children are the ace in the hand. The children are the trump card, and they are played with a regularity that makes it impossible to call coincidence. Think back to the very beginning, Archie's birth. The extraordinary, unprecedented decision not to register the birth in the conventional way, to keep the godparents secret, to drip-feed information in a manner calculated to generate maximum coverage while maintaining maximum control. At the time, some people gave her the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps she genuinely valued privacy. Perhaps she was, as she claimed, simply trying to protect a new baby from the intensity of public life. But then the first photographs arrived, carefully staged, beautifully lit, released on a schedule that a PR team would recognize immediately, and the benefit of the doubt started to feel slightly less warranted. Then came the Oprah interview, and in that interview the children were weapons. Archie was deployed to make the racism allegation the claim that someone in the royal family had made comments about his skin colour before he was born. Whether you believe that claim or not, The use of an unborn child as the vehicle for one of the most damaging accusations ever made against the royal family is striking. A child who had no voice, a child who could not consent, a child whose very existence was being used to make a point.
Meghan Markle put out more and more content connected to her children.
And the pattern has continued and intensified ever since. Lilibet's name chosen to honour the late Queen, a choice that cannot be understood outside of its strategic dimension. The announcement made before the palace was informed. The name a piece of leverage, a claim on the royal legacy, a way of tying the Sussex brand permanently to the Windsor name at precisely the moment when others might have expected a clean break. Then the commercial use of Archie and Lilibet's names through Archwell. The domain names, the email addresses, the entire infrastructure of a commercial enterprise built around the names of two children who had absolutely no say in any of it. The candles sold under names derived from their children. Products bearing the implicit royal stamp of the Sussex connection, all of it pointing in one direction, all of it confirming what Piers Morgan has said from the beginning. This was never about protection. This was always about exploitation.
Meghan and Harry own their kids' names. They own the domain names, they own the emails, they own everything else. When turning Archwell Foundation into Archwell Philanthropies, they said it was for a family thing so that their children could be involved.
And then there is Harry, 41 years old, the man who was supposed to be the protector, the man who stood in front of cameras and told the world he was making this choice, all of this sacrifice, all of this upheaval to give his children a better life, a safer life, a life away from the machinery that he felt had destroyed his mother. Where is Harry in all of this? That is the question that people who genuinely care about those children are asking. Because the children's father, the one person in that household with the standing, the authority, and frankly the moral obligation to say enough, we are not posting the children online, we are not using their names to sell products, we are not deploying our daughter's voice as a brand moment, seems to be entirely absent from the decision-making process. He preaches about social media safety. He gives speeches. He sits on panels. He flies across the world to tell powerful people that the internet is dangerous for young people. And meanwhile, at home in California, his wife is posting his daughter on Instagram. The cognitive dissonance required to hold those two things together is extraordinary, and observers who know Harry well have noticed something. When it comes to these children-related decisions, the voice clip, the Instagram posts, the commercial use of their names Harry is notably, conspicuously, almost pointedly absent from the frame. He is not commenting, he is not endorsing, he is not visibly participating. Which raises a question that nobody in Meghan's camp once asked. Is Harry actually comfortable with what is being done with his children? Or has he, as some have suggested, simply given up trying to influence the decisions his wife has already made? Because if the latter is true and the evidence increasingly suggests that it might be, then the story of Archie and Lilibet is not just a story about Meghan. It is a story about a father who knows what is happening is wrong, and has either convinced himself otherwise or has simply stopped fighting it. Neither of those options is particularly comforting when you think about what it means for two small children growing up in that household.
Based on one that wants to be out of the public light, doesn't want his children involved, and that's why we see keep them get the back of their heads, and one that's desperate to utilise that.
And utilise the children.
So what is the strategy, precisely? Because there is one. There absolutely is one. And once you see it laid out clearly, it is quite something. Stage 1. Establish the children as precious, private, protected. This is the foundation. The reason you left the royal family. The reason you turned your back on everything. The children must be shielded. This framing is essential because it gives you moral authority. It makes you sympathetic. It puts anyone who questions your choices in the position of questioning your love for your children, which is a territory nobody wants to enter. Stage 2. Drip feed access. Not full access, never full access. Just enough to remind the world these children exist. A hand, the back of a head, a name, a mention. Each carefully calibrated release generates coverage without the exposure that would undermine the privacy narrative you established in Stage 1. You maintain the mystique. You maintain the control. Stage 3. When the brand needs a boost, escalate. This is where we are now. The lifestyle brand has not performed as hoped. The Hollywood comeback has stalled. The money is a concern. And so the escalation begins. First a photograph, then a mention, then a voice clip, each step normalizing the next, each step pushing just a little further than the last. And because each step is presented as a spontaneous expression of maternal love, oh, how beautiful. She is just so proud of her children. It is very difficult for the casual observer to see what is actually happening. But Piers Morgan is not a casual observer, and neither are the millions of people who have been paying close attention to this story for years. They see the escalation. They see the timing. They see the commercial context in which each child-related moment arrives. And they understand, with a clarity that no amount of beautiful voice clips can obscure, that what they are watching is not a mother sharing joy. It is a strategist deploying assets.
As her clout dwindled, as people lost interest in what she and Harry had going on, she was going to move to the next generation. That was the final card she had to play, Archie and Lilibet.
The final card. Think about what that means. 7 years into this saga, 4 years since the Oprah interview, years of Netflix documentaries and tell-all books and podcast ventures and lifestyle brand launches and Hollywood networking, and the final card is a 7-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl who had no vote in any of it. That is where we have arrived. That is the full arc of the Meghan Markle project. And it is, I think, one of the saddest things about this entire story. Because those children did not ask for this. They did not choose this life. They did not choose to be the commercial centerpiece of their mother's brand. They did not choose to have their voices, their names, their very identities turned into leverage. They are children. They deserve better than this. And the people who are saying so most loudly, Piers Morgan foremost among them, are saying so because they believe it, not because they wish the children ill, precisely because they do not. Let us talk about the childhood narrative. Because in the same interview in which Meghan was deploying her children as emotional currency, she was also deploying her own childhood. And the two things are not unconnected. Meghan speaks about her childhood in ways that have attracted considerable scrutiny from people who have done the research. The dinner tray story, the television dinners eaten alone, the sense of being neglected, overlooked, struggling. The picture she paints is of a child who had very little, who had to fight for everything, who was never quite seen or valued by the people who were supposed to love her most. But the timeline does not add up. It never quite has. We know she attended a prestigious private school. We know she travelled to Argentina. We know her father, Thomas Markle, was a television lighting director who earned a decent living and was, by all accounts, including Meghan's own early accounts, the ones she made before he became inconvenient, an attentive and devoted father. We know she spoke about him with genuine love and affection for years, in speeches, in blog posts, in interviews, a man she described warmly, proudly, as someone who had given her everything she needed. And now he is the villain. Now he is the absent figure, the cold presence, the man who made her eat TV dinners while watching Jeopardy. It is the same pattern she applies to the royal family, to her former friends, to every relationship that has served its purpose and then been revised. The past is not a fixed thing in Meghan Markle's world. The past is a resource. It is raw material. It is something to be shaped and reshaped in service of whatever narrative the present moment requires. Piers Morgan has made this point extensively and powerfully. He has argued, with considerable justification, that a woman who rewrites her own history so comprehensively and so consistently cannot be trusted to present any narrative honestly, including the narrative about her children, including the narrative about why she left the royal family, including every word she says in every interview she gives.
It's almost like Meghan has a disorder. She thinks we can't see the past and the things that she said and understand that this is a woman that has made herself one thing in the past, and now she's trying to rewrite all of this history now that she's in the royal family to be this deprived child with, no one really caring for her.
And this is where the children's story and the personal story converge in the most uncomfortable way. Because if Meghan is capable of rewriting her relationship with her father, a man she publicly adored, then she is capable of rewriting her relationship with her children in whatever way serves her best at any given a moment. The emails she claims to be sending them, the beautiful image she is constructing of herself as a devoted mother, these are the building blocks of a future narrative. a narrative that will be deployed when the time comes, in whatever way is most useful. And what those children will make of all this when they are old enough to form their own views, well, that is perhaps the most consequential open question in this entire story. Because let us be honest about what is actually at stake here. This is not just a story about Instagram posts and voice clips. This is a story about two young children, Archie, who turned 7 earlier this month, and Lilibet, who will turn 5 in just a few weeks, and what their future actually looks like. They have no relationship with their grandfather, the king. They have no relationship with their uncle, William. They have never properly met their cousins, George, Charlotte, and Louis. They are growing up in California, largely isolated from their British heritage, their royal family, and the half of their identity that connects them to one of the most remarkable institutions in the world. And they are growing up with their images, their names, and their very voices, being used as commercial and strategic assets by a mother who has framed all of this as an act of love. Piers Morgan has spoken about this with considerable feeling, because the children's long-term well-being is genuinely at stake, not in the abstract, in the very specific, very concrete sense that decisions being made right now about how to use these children publicly will have consequences that last for decades. Children who grow up being used as brand ambassadors for their parents' commercial ventures do not generally look back on that experience with warmth. Children who discover that their privacy was treated as an asset to be monetized tend to have strong feelings about it. And 7-year-old Archie and 4-year-old Lilibet are going to grow up. They are going to ask questions. They are going to look at the record. They are going to find the interviews, the Instagram posts, the voice clips, the emails their mother claimed to be writing them while simultaneously using their existence as leverage. And they are going to form views. What has been observed by those who know is something rather poignant, that Harry, for all his faults, for all his catastrophic misjudgments, does not appear to be entirely comfortable with this situation. That he did not sign up, not really, for his children to become brand assets. That somewhere inside the man who once instinctively protected his children's faces from cameras, who insisted their images be kept private, who was genuinely and visibly committed to giving them an ordinary life somewhere in there, that instinct still flickers. And it is in direct conflict with the strategy his wife is pursuing.
Harry and Meghan have quite literally created an even more of a bigger bubble to do with those children, to do with the surrogacy rumors, to do with, you know, how old they are, where they are, and things like that, because they're constantly playing games. They have used the children to weaponize them against the royal family.
Now, what about the royal family? What about William and Catherine, who are watching this unfold from across an ocean, who are raising 3 children of their own in circumstances that could not be more different, and who have exercised a restraint in the face of extreme provocation that has been, frankly, quite remarkable? The palace does not respond to Instagram posts. The palace does not issue statements about voice clips. The palace maintains, with extraordinary discipline, the position that it does not engage with this kind of thing at the level at which Meghan is operating, and that restraint is not weakness. That restraint is strategy, a very good strategy, because every time Meghan posts, every time she deploys one of her children for effect, every time she trolls William and Catherine with a carefully timed piece of content, the palace's silence is the loudest possible response. But behind the scenes, the view is clear. Those within the institution who have spoken to trusted sources are unequivocal. What Meghan is doing with those children is considered deeply inappropriate. The use of Lilibet's name as a commercial brand, the posting of her voice online, the deliberate timing of child-related content to coincide with moments of positive coverage for William and Catherine, none of this goes unnoticed. None of this is without consequence. And William, who will one day be king, who has spoken to people he trusts about the Sussex situation with a directness that those people found striking, has made his views known. He does not believe these children are being protected. He believes the opposite. He believes they are being used. And the gulf between how he and Catherine raised George, Charlotte, and Louis with careful, considered decisions about what is shared and what is protected, with genuine discussion about what serves the children versus what serves the brand, and how Meghan approaches the same questions, is a gulf that grows wider with every passing month.
Catherine and William are highly engaged parents. We see this reflected, whereas Harry and Meghan, they just give us these little tidbits. And you just got to wonder, who are the kids with the rest of the time? Meghan is more than willing to fly off to New York overnight just to go to a play. And most moms don't do that.
The contrast is not accidental on the palace's part either. When William and Catherine release footage of Louis natural, unforced, joyful footage of a little boy being himself, they are not thinking about brand strategy. They are sharing a moment of their family life in a way that serves the public's affection for the royal family without exploiting anyone in it. That is the difference. That is the distinction. And it is a distinction that becomes more visible with every piece of content Meghan produces. There is a broader point to be made here, and it is one that Piers Morgan has returned to again and again, in different ways with different examples, but always with the same conclusion. The way a person treats the people who cannot protect themselves from them tells you everything about that person's character. Everything. Children cannot protect themselves from a parent who chooses to use them. Staff members cannot always protect themselves from an employer who chooses to bully them. Friends cannot always protect themselves from a person who has decided to discard them. And former family members cannot always protect themselves from a relative who has chosen to weaponize intimate knowledge of them. Meghan Markle has left a trail through all of these categories. The bullying allegations from staff, multiple staff members, across multiple households, documented and reported in sources as serious as the Financial Times. The friends who were close to her and then, suddenly, were not the pattern of intense relationships that burned brightly and then ended without explanation. The family members, her father, her half-siblings, and eventually the royal family itself, who found themselves transformed from people she loved into supporting characters in a narrative she controlled. And now, at the end of that trail, the children, the people who have the least power of all, the people who need her most, the people who cannot choose to step back, who cannot issue a statement, who cannot protect their own interests. They are 4 and 7 years old. They are entirely dependent on the adults around them to make good decisions on their behalf. And the decisions being made on their behalf are not good. They are not protective. They are not in the children's interests. They are in Meghan's interests. Tom Bower, who has spent more time researching Meghan Markle than almost any other journalist alive, has made a point that lands with particular force in this context. He has tracked the pattern of relationships in her life and identified something consistent, something that runs through all of them like a thread.
The truth about Meghan is she will always find a way in which she thinks she can win. And the casualties are irrelevant, whether it's her father, her old best friends, her first husband. There always will be casualties in her life. The question is, when will Harry become the casualty?
The casualties are irrelevant. That sentence deserves to be sat with for a long moment. Because if Tom Bower is right, and his research record suggests he usually is, then the children are not exempt from that pattern simply because they are children. They are assets in the current chapter. What happens when they become inconvenient? When they develop their own views? When they push back? When they insist on knowing the royal family their mother has kept from them? That is the question nobody in Meghan's world wants to answer. Where does all of this leave the relationship between the Sussexes and the royal family? It is a question that has a clear answer if you are willing to look at it honestly, and the answer is further apart than ever. Those children, Archie and Lilibet, are the king's grandchildren. They are William's nephew and niece. They are Charlotte, George and Louis's cousins. They share a bloodline with one of the most remarkable families in the world. And they do not know any of those people. Not really. Not in any meaningful sense. Not in the way that cousins know each other, in the way that grandchildren know a grandfather, in the way that a family knows itself. And Meghan Markle has made that choice. She has chosen to keep those children away from their family. She has simultaneously chosen to use those children's connection to that family as a commercial and strategic asset. She has had, in other words, it both ways. The royal connection without the royal relationships. The prestige without the proximity. The value of the brand without the inconvenience of the actual people. Piers Morgan has described this as one of the more cynical moves in a saga that has not been short of cynical moves. Because the royal family, whatever its imperfections, whatever the things that went wrong, whatever the genuine difficulties that existed, those people are the children's family. Archie and Lilibet have a grandfather who is a king. They have an uncle who will be a king. They have cousins they have barely met. And they are being denied those relationships, while their connection to those relationships is simultaneously being monetized. It is the ultimate expression of having it both ways, and it cannot last. Because at some point, whether through the children's own growing awareness, through a change in Harry's position, through external circumstances that nobody can yet predict, the accounting will come. The children will be old enough to understand what was done and why. And on that day, Meghan Markle's carefully constructed narrative about being a protective, devoted, beautiful mother will face its most serious test.
She's using their name and likeness and royal titles to sell a candle, and they're not even old enough to consent to being used in that way.
So what does all of this tell us? What does it mean, zoomed out to the widest possible view? It tells us that the Meghan Markle story is entering its most consequential chapter. The earlier chapters were about ambition and aspiration, a woman who wanted to be part of something extraordinary, and then decided the terms were not quite right. The middle chapters were about conflict, the Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, the books, the allegations, the counter-allegations, the endlessly churning machine of claim and counterclaim. But this chapter, the chapter we are in now, is about what happens when the strategies run out, when the options narrow, when the well begins to dry up. And in this chapter, Piers Morgan's analysis proves most prescient, because he identified, earlier than most, that Meghan would eventually turn to the children, that they were the one asset she had not yet fully deployed, that when everything else began to stall, the deals, the partnerships, the Hollywood relationships, the podcast ventures, the children would become central to the strategy in a way they had not been before. And here we are, exactly where he said we would be. The stateside backlash that has been building is real, and it is significant. Americans who were, for a long time, more sympathetic to Meghan than British audiences are increasingly seeing through the facade. The interviews that were supposed to generate warmth are generating skepticism instead. The lifestyle brand that was supposed to capture the Garten market is struggling to find its footing. The Hollywood connections that were supposed to open doors are proving considerably less reliable than expected. And through all of it, through every stumble, every failure, every piece of coverage that does not go quite the way she planned, the children are there, ready to be deployed. Archie and Lilibet, the ultimate insurance policy. The thing that, for now at least, keeps the conversation going, keeps the clicks coming, keeps the brand alive. But Piers Morgan's final word on this, and it is a word worth ending on, is about accountability. About the fact that strategies that use people, especially children who cannot protect themselves, tend eventually to produce their own consequences. That the record does not disappear. That the internet, which Meghan so loudly wants to make safer for children, has a very long memory. And that one day, two young people are going to sit down and read that record. And they are going to have questions that their mother will find very difficult to answer. Because you cannot tell a child you protected them while the evidence shows you exploited them. You cannot tell a child you loved them above all else while the record shows their worth was calculated commercially. You cannot tell a child the choices you made were for their benefit, when the benefit consistently flowed in one direction only. The strategy, as Piers Morgan has made clear, is visible. It has always been visible to those who looked, and increasingly, the whole world is looking. Before we go tonight, I want to ask you something that I think has been sitting underneath everything we have discussed. If Archie and Lilibet were not royal, if their names carried no connection to the most famous family in the world, do you think we would still be seeing them deployed in the way we are? And a second question, perhaps the more personal one. If you were one of those children, growing up in that house, with that record being built around you without your knowledge or your consent, what would you want your mother to have done differently? Those questions do not have easy answers, but they are the right questions to ask. And the fact that we are asking them is in its own way a form of accountability. The record exists. It is not going anywhere. Thank you so much for spending this time with me tonight. I know so many of you come here every day because this story matters to you not as gossip, but as something real. Something that touches on values you hold deeply about family and honesty, and what it means to do right by the people in your care. I am grateful for every one of you. If tonight's video gave you something to think about, please do give it a like. It genuinely helps more people find this channel. And if you are not yet subscribed, please do hit that button, because we are here every single day. Share this one with someone who has been following this story. I think they will have a great deal to say about it. Until tomorrow, take care of yourselves.